So I just walk away from my parents around the corner. Back in the day, you could do that. It's 2024. You can't walk around the corner anymore without parents. And I start singing 3 songs: Jingle Bells, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and another one.
Yeah.
On repeat for hours. And I have a terrible singing voice. I saw one of the businesses, because of the cost, rather than having an A4 booklet, they had 2 A4 pages. So I said, perfect, okay. So we went back, our designer designed what it would look like in a 4-page brochure. So when I came to my sales interaction, I hand them their brand, beautifully done, in a 4-page booklet that looks like it should be actually going to a property. And they looked at me like, wait, we've never done this design. I'm like, yeah, I know, we did that for you. And I will give you that at the same price you're paying for your 2 A4s because your brand is too good to be doing 2 A4 pages. Boom, deal.
Guys, welcome to another episode of The Target Table, and today with us we have Frank Greeff. Frank Greeff, you began your journey as a chef, then pivoted to revolutionize the real estate industry alongside your brothers. You also then grew your business Realbase from 3 to 400 employees, would later sell it to Domain for over $180 million, and now you're on a mission to raise $1 million for charity through your book, Eat With Purpose, which is a cookbook. Dude, thanks so much for dropping by. We're excited to unpack it and dive in.
My absolute pleasure.
So before we started filming, you were telling me that you, what was the Japanese word that you used for it?
A misogi.
What is a misogi? And that's something you're doing at the moment.
Okay, so for anybody who actually knows what a misogi is, I do apologize because I'm going to butcher it. I don't do much investigative journalism myself, but essentially the way it was framed to me from my friend Jack was something that you do each year,
right,
which has a 50% chance of failure. When you think about it, it scares you. And the idea is that like bookmarks your year. So whether that be a physical challenge, whether it be a mental challenge for me, it'd be like, I go in the hills and don't talk for 7 days. It'd be like a 90% chance of failure. So I couldn't do that.
Yeah.
But something that you look back and go, 2024 was the year I did X, and it was something big.
Does it have to be a daily thing, or does it just have to be something?
No,
big?
It could just be one big feat or something. So for us, we're doing every single day for an entire year, running 6Ks a day minimum. Right. So New Year's Day, 4 a.m. was the start of the year, obviously. Thanks, Frank. But we did a marathon. So we started a year. So I was in Byron, my friend was in Sydney, and we were FaceTiming each other every 7 Ks. And so that was the starting point. And so like 6 Ks is a minimum. On average, it's about 10 to 12 Ks daily.
Right.
Yeah.
Wow, man. Okay. And then how did you come up with that idea? Like, how did you even decide? Okay, I need a misogi, and this is what it's going to be. Like, how did you even end up there?
So my friend called me and he goes, I just heard about this thing called a misogi. and he was pumped. And I think
he's like, now you have to do it with me.
Yeah. Well, he explained it to me and I was like, oh, that sounds really cool. And he just literally said, I want to run 6Ks every day for a year. And I was like, well, now I want to do that. I was like, that sounds cool. And I started thinking about it and I told my wife, she was like, oh, please don't do that. Like, she's like, please. She's like, what about those times where Oscar's sick or something? I'm like, yeah, that's the point.
Yeah.
The point is when things get tough.
I think it's important, man, to have those non-negotiables in life, like, so I didn't realize I had a misogi, but I have one this year. But I like the idea of calling it a misogi now because it sounds way cooler than having a goal.
Yeah, that's right.
So for me, it was to exercise predominantly at the gym once a day, every day. And in the last 16 days, I've been at the gym 14 times. But like, I definitely agree with you. Like, you got to have those non-negotiables in life. And me and my partner, she's like, what if you're sick? What if this? What if that? And I'm like, I just go anyway.
Yeah. And
I think there's something really primal and valuable about a non-negotiable thing that you have to do all the time. But what have been the rewards so far, man, about doing that every day?
So I think the biggest reward comes in those days where you really don't feel like doing it.
Yeah.
Right. So I went to Bali with Jack last week.
Yeah.
We woke up at 3 a.m., got to the airport, get to our accommodation finally at 3 p.m. that night.
Yeah.
So 3 a.m. to 3 p.m. And it was like, the last thing I want to do is go run.
Right. You're jet lagged.
Yeah.
Travel.
And like where we were was in the mountains of Bali.
Yeah.
Right. And it was raining. And I was like, and I was thinking about every excuse conceivable why I shouldn't do it today. Like, today isn't the day. And my friend Jack just looks at me like, mate, you're fucking dreaming. Like, we're in day 5, brother. And I'm like, yeah, you're right. And I was like, okay. And that's the good thing about doing it with someone. You have someone there to keep you accountable. And then we did it. I get back and the smile just on my face is just huge because I'm like, okay, I've achieved that now.
Yeah.
Right. And it's like, and then 4 days later, same thing. We'd just done this huge workout the day before called a Murph, which is 100 pull-ups, 200
that's the one based off those guy in
like
Marine
Marines.
Corps.
Yeah, that's right.
And he had this crazy routine.
Yes, exactly. And so we did one of those.
Yeah.
and then we had to go do the run. Right?
Yeah.
Like, so it's like, so each time you push and stretch yourself, I think those are the days that gives you the biggest reward. So has there been any like net specific impact? No, but has it been more like a mindset shift when you're like, I can't do it, and you come up with every reason, and then you do it, and then the feeling of going, oh shit, I can. And that just compounds every single day.
Yeah, because every day I've been to the gym pretty much bar two days. I was like, it feels good and I want to be here.
Yeah.
The other days I was like, man, I really just want to get this over with.
Those are the best.
And those are the best workouts because you get maybe 30 minutes, 40 minutes in, and then you start to go, this feels good.
Yeah.
And then you never not leave feeling good.
You never regret doing it.
Yeah. You always regret
not doing it.
not doing it, right? But like, I think there's so much power in doing things that you're not really feeling like doing it, and I think it's important in life, man. But
there's an epic, just to add on there, there's an epic new podcast with David Goggins and Huberman.
I saw that
Amazing.
one. It's amazing.
And him talking about like bringing into the neuroscience of like that part in your brain, which I can't remember the name of, but the idea of essentially the willpower muscle and like stretching that and how that builds when you do not want to do something. It's just was like when I heard that, it's like felt obvious, but I was just like, that is so cool.
I just like how, Huberman's always bringing out these things that are kind of, they're not public knowledge and not like top of mind in the media. And he's always bringing up these topics. And can you Google what part of the brain it is? But anyone that's listening to this, you have to check that out because he was talking about how there's a specific part of the brain that you can't grow unless you do something you hate.
Yeah.
And it can't be like something that's an inconvenience that you kind of enjoy because I kind of enjoy going to the gym. Yeah. But it's like actually doing something you hate. And I think this is why.
Or it's those days where you're like, today I do not feel like going to the gym, or today I do not feel like making those cold calls. Yeah. Those are the days that it's most important to do that thing.
Yeah. Yeah, there's some new data science around it. But like for me, dude, it's kind of like when you become a parent.
Yeah.
I hate waking up in the middle of the night. Yeah. And it's like you end up with this amazing willpower as a parent, dude.
I do not want to clean this poo
right
now.
I do not want to wake up every 2 hours throughout the middle of the night, and you do it anyway. And that's what you do when you love your kids. But yeah, so just to quickly pace through your story, man, because I want to dive into more about what you're doing now with the book and everything. But just to kind of cover the ground really quickly, you started off as a chef when you were 16, and then you dived into the real estate space, and you were so successful in the real estate game that you ended up putting your parents in a tricky situation.
Yes.
And do you want to just unpack that quickly, man, and then we can kind of
no worries.
Get through the rest of it.
So life as a chef, did that for 3 years, 60 hours a week. It taught me how to work really hard.
Yeah.
One day my brother said, let's go move to Melbourne and install real estate signboards.
Yeah.
And so we did exactly that. We moved to Melbourne. We built up a business for about a year, sold for 150 grand. I thought I'd made it. Came back to Sydney and did it all over again.
Okay.
Over the next 4 years, we continued to kind of build this really service-based business, which was about as unsexy as the word signboards is, like, physically just installing signboards.
Yeah.
And then we were underneath a franchise agreement. And so were my parents simultaneously, but in a different space. So they had the franchise agreement for photography. We had it for signboards.
Yeah.
And we got to a place where our ambitions kind of outgrew what was possible within this franchise.
Yeah.
And so we made a decision to build our own brand and our own entity, if you will, which was Real Hub.
Yeah.
Nothing to do with my parents, but ultimately because of the association in terms of, they're your children, what had happened was our decision to launch that cost them their entire business.
Far out, man.
So they spent 6 years building this, no, more than that, would have been like 8 years, something like that, building this business. They had a purchaser for $1 million. They were just about to retire. And on the day that their purchase agreement was about to close was the day that their franchise agreement got terminated.
Talk about serendipity of the timing, right? Yeah. So what happened with that with you? Because I think it's really interesting when entrepreneurs in particular are put in situations where there's a lot of pain or there's a lot of reward. And it sounds like there's maybe a lot of a pain associated with, what happened with your parents, and then you use that as motivation.
I recently heard Alex Hormozy talk about, use the fuel you got. And that upon reflection, that's exactly what it was.
Right.
Was we had lost our parents their livelihood. all the brothers now were all in on this business. So like the entire family unit was reliant on us becoming successful,
Okay.
or else we were fucked, right? So that was the fuel. And whenever I think about that, I think that is the catalyst. That place that we had to go to was a catalyst for the success, because I just don't think we would have driven as hard. And so these days I try and with like my team and stuff is kind of, not having to put them in that situation, but it's almost like reverse engineer it. It's like, what was that? That was the why. Your why was so powerful that it pushed you when that time came where you couldn't be bothered to go to that meeting, or you didn't want to bring the right energy to that sales conversation, or you didn't want to do the market, whatever it is. If your why is strong enough, it doesn't matter. Like you'll just keep pushing. You'll keep pushing because you realize it's far greater than you as an individual. It's now broadened to like your little community, or for us, it was our family around us.
Yeah. So would you say that there was pain or joy in that initially?
Initially, it was not only just pain, but it was it was pain, it was remorse, it was guilt. I think guilt was probably the strongest, like that moment of seeing my mum with a tear down her eye and realizing what we had done through our decision making and our process. For the people that have moved from South Africa to New Zealand to sharpening knives and picking apples on the weekend to create a life for us, the decision we made just made their entire livelihoods erode. Had so much guilt associated with it. But you had to move away from that really quickly, right?
Yeah.
Like that being a daily thing and going like, oh, woe was me, or I feel so bad, wasn't going to get us to the feeling where we could kind of forgive that pain. But the most important lesson there was just the way in which my parents handled it.
Okay.
It was never our fault in their eyes.
Wow.
They never saw that. And so that was not only, you kind of quickly could lose the feeling of guilt and realize, okay, they're backing us. Let's go.
Yeah.
And then that's ultimately we then knew, we were very commercial in terms of like, it was always about that big dollar figure at the end of it.
Yeah.
But because of the why is what is important. So like when I was negotiating the sale, I knew that every $1 million extra was going to be more money in their pockets. And it was all about going, making it almost like in our brains, this was an investment for them.
Right.
They lost $1 million, but we're going to make it back in spades by the time we're done.
Yeah.
So we believed in ourselves.
And that story, ended up with you merging with another business.
Yeah.
And then later on being bought out or acquired recently by Domain.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Exactly.
Yeah. So that was maybe a year ago?
Yeah,
that happened?
we're actually closing in almost on 2 years now.
Wow,
2
okay.
years since the deal closed.
Yeah.
Since that all unfolded.
And just to be clear on that acquisition, because it's quite large, is it 180 million
Cash.
cash?
Yeah.
Jesus.
Yeah,
That's a big acquisition.
Yeah, it was. Look, it's one of the larger ones. Like it certainly in our space, it was the largest there was in terms of real estate property technology. Like we kind of set the tone for that.
Because you created an online marketplace.
Yeah.
You pioneered some programming.
Yeah.
And Domain either saw you as a threat or an addition to their goal.
Absolutely an addition. So we carved out this really interesting space. So for all the listeners, what we did is created a marketplace where every time a real estate agent sells a property, they need a series of marketing tools, whether it be photography, signboards, brochures, go online.
Yeah.
And so we created a marketplace where they can pick and choose their suppliers and then transact on those deals.
Yeah.
But what became really interesting to the market and how we were able to get those dollars is because of the merger, our next closest competitor is about 1/8 the size of us.
Wow. Okay.
So for every one in every two properties that sells in Australia and New Zealand will come through our platform.
Wow.
So whoever acquired us then became essentially we're the only players viable at scale, and so therefore whoever acquired us, it created a competitive edge to their business.
Wow, that's incredible.
And for Domain, they were just exactly the puzzle that the piece that we had was the puzzle piece that they were missing. So it just made a lot of logical sense to bring it together.
And are they going toe to toe with realestate.com, do you think? Or like who would you say that their biggest competitors are?
Yeah, that's their biggest competitor for sure. And this is a differentiator because and again that was part of the strategic play for them is, well, there's only one of us.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? So if you had to start it from scratch and go again, it's very hard. It's very complex. It'll take a lot of time. So this then bought, 10 plus years of spending what probably could be close to by the time you're done to get there.
What's it like? Because I've never been in this situation, but being an entrepreneur, having built something that is, I guess, momentous in scale, and then being acquired and merging into another business, like what's that experience like as an entrepreneur?
Good. It has so many layers to it, right? So I think The acquisition process itself was brutal.
Okay.
My role was CEO at the time.
Yeah.
Myself and the CFO were the only two people that spent majority of their time on this deal. So for 1 year, from start to finish, all we thought about pretty much from day to night was this deal.
Wow.
And during that time, I had, like 2 to 3 like almost mental breakdowns. One was an insomnia bout. The other one, I just burst into tears to my wife on the way to work. Like, it was immense pressure. I'm 31 years old. I'd never done any kind of formal education. So a lot of this process I was learning on the go, right? So I'm sitting at a boardroom table with KPMG lawyers. There's 17 partners there. They're all really smart, talking about deep financial drivers on a 250-page document that we're going to hand over. And it's my responsibility to sign off on this document.
Yeah.
And, we had a number of other shareholders where they were kind of like, well, we're trusting you, Frank. And so I was like, fuck, there's a lot of pressure.
And these aren't, just like, for lack of better words, just everyday people. These are people that are like ruthless and like trying to, I guess, succeed in business. So they're scrutinizing every little finite
now
detail.
They're on our side. So what you do is a thing called vendor due diligence, where you do your own due diligence and then hand it over,
right,
rather than getting scrutinized. So we had it's what called a competitive process. So we had 10 parties in to bid for us. So rather than having all 10 parties and then they have to scrutinize you one by one, you do the due diligence on yourself through KPMG, through DLA Piper, through a technology firm, and then you hand over the documentation. So we handed over like 650 pages of documentation about ourselves. But I have to be the conduit between this entire business entity, myself and the CFO, in order to prepare that 650-page document.
Right.
And so, like, in a room, or the accountants, is you have people who start at $2,500 an hour and go to like $6,500 an hour. So they're really, really, really fucking smart, right?
Yeah.
And so you have to, and like, also, I'm very commercial, so I know if I'm like, what does that mean? It's like that question will cost me like $500.
Yeah.
So I have to really quickly think and then figure it out. And it's like, if I don't know that answer, I got to go and Google it and stuff like that. So it was like, so back to your question, it was like, how did it feel? It was, in the time, it was kind of like the misogi and the idea of like, you're stretching yourself to a place that a year prior, I don't think I would have thought was humanly possible for myself.
Okay.
And then post that, you go, okay, now I know what is capable. And so that's the really special reward, kind of at the end of it, not just necessarily from the monetary value, but from like the, wow, okay, I've done something that's really special. And I've learnt so much along the way.
Yeah. It's interesting you say that. Like, what would you say that if you had to summarize the 5 emotions that were the most consistent over that year period?
Yeah.
What were the 5 predominant emotions you were feeling that year?
These might not fall into like the emotions gamut in terms of the words, but it gives you a sense, right?
Yeah.
So number 1 would just be stress, pure stress. For me, stress doesn't come out in the form of like what normal people have, which is anxiety.
Yeah.
It came out in things like the insomnia bout, right?
Okay.
So it was like, it came out in bodily, like in my body, it came out.
Yeah.
Or like coming home on a Tuesday, I'm like, oh man, I feel like an icy cold drink. I'm like, I don't even drink that much. Why? And I couldn't connect the dots. Number 2 is uncertainty. So the biggest thing about a deal is until the day you finish,
you don't know what's going to happen.
You have no idea. So we had spent up until the moment of closure $3.2 million. And I was getting told by certain shareholders in my business, like who were double my age, Frank, you're making the wrong mistake. You're costing us money. This is a terrible idea. Trust me, I'm double your age. And so you have to take that weight of going, maybe he's right. Maybe this person is right. But then try and back yourself. So then that feeling of uncertainty is probably like the biggest thing that overshadows everything. The next one is there are these bouts of excitement, right? It's like, so there's these moments where a term sheet comes in and you see that number and you're like, oh my God. Like,
what's a term sheet? Good.
So term sheet is essentially like prior to us going to a formalized agreement, what are we going to base our, so the agreement itself, the shareholder, the share transaction agreement is going to be 200 pages long. But what is the 7 pages in principle what we're talking about? So it's 180 million. The deal's going to close on this month. Our expectation is the shareholders are going to do X. So it's like
a cheat sheet.
Yeah, exactly. Like a little bit of a cheat sheet around.
And that was getting you excited, like seeing those numbers, what was going to happen.
Yeah, because it's like all the possibility, right?
Yeah.
Now it's like, yesterday I was stressed and today I'm like, whoa, okay. It starts to feel a little bit more real and those things get really exciting. Or like I come back from a pitch when I'm, we had 10 bidders in there, but I pitched to way more people.
Yeah.
And you leave, and I'm like, come back to the brothers, and I'm like, oh man, they were frothing. And then we're like, yes, like, you know, like we're all pumped. And so there's definitely these moments, and I think those are the things that get you across the line, right? Like, so if you always had the uncertainty, you always had the stress, you know, when I got told that thing from the shareholder, I probably would have backed out. But it's like hearing it from the advisors or hearing it from another party going like, wow, this is really special. You go, okay, that's enough juice, enough fuel to get me to that next stage.
Yeah.
I reckon those are the three big ones.
So stress, uncertainty,
and excitement.
which sounds like a pendulum swinging from one side
That's
to the
right.
other. Just one day I'm happy, the next day I'm miserable.
That's right.
Next day I can't sleep.
And on the edge of the pendulum is like spikes, so you're getting slammed against them.
It's a great visual. So obviously being the CEO and the person putting this together with the CFO, like a lot of eyes are on you to pull this off. You know, pressure from the family, pressure from your team, the company, and then also to like perform to your shareholders and stuff like that. So for you, like a lot of voices are in your head. Did you at some point have to kind of turn the voices off and just trust your gut? Like, how do you make decisions the right way in those moments?
One of the things I did is we didn't tell any of the business. So there's two of us who were involved in the transaction.
Right.
There was a third that would be more like an advisory spitballer. So for example, myself and an amazing shareholder that was part of the merger, his name is Tim Dean, somewhere in the range of 50, right? Fit guy. We would go running in the morning, we'd do like 15 Ks, and he would get me to run scripts and dialogues, how I'm going to pitch from start to finish my 30-page slide deck, and I would be running scripts with him whilst we're running. So I'm like, and then the business, right? And we're doing that, and he's like, no, again, and we're doing that, and we would do that every single day, right? So he's like, it's like a coach too. He's like, Frank, you're the guy, but I'm going to be here to push you. So I'm going to ask you the questions, and we'll do it in a really stressful environment, running up a hill in Manly Dam, right? so back to there was no one in the business that knew.
Yeah.
It was just the 10 shareholders that knew. Yeah. And then it was around making sure that I can reconcile in myself who are the people that are believers, who are the people that I trust their opinion, and who are the people that I should be weary of their opinion, right? Who might have a
you put them in 3 categories.
Kind of, yeah. And I whenever I say these things and share these things, it makes me sound like a much more sophisticated person. I have a spreadsheet and Delta, and I'm like on Minority Report. It's
just in your mind.
It's just in my mind, but then like I kind of have to like back channel and figure out, okay, like what is it? How is it that I think to try and help the listeners to go like, this is what I do, and hopefully that gives value, right? So my brothers are absolutely my rock. Like Jacques and Ken, they are the people that I confide in the most, because when I talk to them, it's absolute trust that we're all on the same mission. We're all on the same journey. Then we had the other shareholders, you know, Tim, when I went running for, like, I absolutely knew he had the right intentions in mind. He knew I was the right person to try and position the business for a sale, but he was going to be there every moment of the way to try and help me and back me where I can. And then there were some other people that probably less so, right? And so, like, if I take a step back and go, okay, well, other people don't have all those things you've just mentioned, it's like, what I think is the most important thing in business, whether it be a small business, medium or large, is making sure you're surrounding yourself with the right people. Who are those people that you can pick up the phone to and make that call to, that when times are tough, they're going to pull you out, rather than the easy option is always like, I care for your feelings, just, it's okay. Like, just chill. Like, it's okay. Like, it sounds really stressful. Maybe you should just, you know, like, throw in the towel. That's the easy option, because I get to protect you when I get to see you at this highest level of stress. Where I was at this place where I was so stressed out and like visibly deteriorating. And I say to my brother, like, I don't know if I can keep going. And he like looks me in the eye and he's like, now is the perfect time. We have to keep going. Push. Like, this is your thing. This is the mark on your career. Like, you have to do it. And then hearing that, you know, as tough as it is for him, because he's like, I can see my brother here is like absolutely flipping out. That was the right message I needed. And so by having those right people around in life, they're going to push you in the right times. Yeah.
Like you were saying with the Huberman thing, it's a moment where you're like, I can't go any further.
Yeah.
It's called the anterior mid-cingulate cortex. I probably butchered the pronunciation.
The anterior, can you just zoom in, dude? Anterior mid
singular cortex.
So is that that willpower you were speaking to?
Yeah.
Is that something you've always had, or is that something you've developed as an entrepreneur throughout your journey?
It comes in waves, if I'm honest. And that's like, I think this, listening to that podcast really helped me understand it, because they said as easy it is to build, it is to lose. And if I think back to my life in terms of whether it be training, whether it be business, whether it be, making those cold calls, whatever it is, you go through these waves where it becomes, I just used to think about it as momentum builds momentum. Like when you're on that treadmill and you're doing it, it's all good. When you're off it, it feels so hard to get on. So whenever I went through these bouts of like stress or just like overwork and stuff like that, and then I pulled back, there were certainly moments where then my willpower became like, oh, how did I be able to go to the gym 6 times last year? Like, that's crazy. Like I'm hurting. It's twice as what, So I think it definitely contracts and builds throughout the whole journey.
Yeah.
But now knowing that, I'm really conscious. Like now, like when my mind goes, you can't, you don't want to. And it comes up with really compelling excuses.
Yeah.
That's the thing I learned in Bali is like we were training 3 times a week. Like my goal was I want to train the hardest I've ever trained in my life and just see what's possible.
Yeah.
And I came up with the most brilliant excuses. And I was like, that is so cool.
What were some of those excuses for you?
So the best one was it was raining and there was hills. And I was like, we're going to get killed by a car. I think it's actually safer if we don't train, like in my mind. Now I didn't voice this to my friends, but like that was a really compelling excuse. I was like, yeah, you like living, don't you, Frank? I'm like, of course I do, and then my mate's like, it's raining. Let's go run away from the cars. I'm like, fuck, okay.
What was the next excuse then? You're like, well, it's wet.
Well, no, then I was like, I caught myself out of that one. I mean, okay, I've got, you've now it became about accountability. Now it became like, I don't have a compelling excuse to tell my friends and I can't be a loser. So I gotta go.
My partner Ellie, because I had a conversation. She hadn't even seen the pod, but I told her about that episode with Goggins and Huberman, and she's like, oh, okay. And then the next day she was like, okay, the kids are at daycare. I might just go hang out at the office. Like she likes coming in and hanging out with the team here. But then she realized, okay, the house has a lot that needs to get done that she hasn't wanted to deal with for a year. And she's like, maybe I'll build that part of my brain. Then she did the thing, and then she felt great about it. So I think, there is this reward through doing things we don't want to do. Yeah. It sounds like you're doing a hell of a lot of it that year. Yeah. And your brother was like, just keep going, man. Just keep going. And it's so important to have people around you in those moments that just keep pushing you, that don't allow you to, I guess, fall to the victim card, if you will. Yeah. Okay, cool, man. So what really is interesting to me is like, okay, the business gets acquired. Like, talk me through that moment and how did you feel? Like a year of stress, then we get it acquired. What happens then? So
first day, which is something I've shared on a few podcasts, is the first day the acquisition was happening, that's when I burst into tears, called my wife, and she's like, you got to come home. Like, you're a wreck. You can't go into the office. And I think that was just like the crescendo of that stress in that moment. So
it all caught up with you?
It all just caught up with me. And it was just like, I was outside my favorite coffee shop getting a nice, double shot cappuccino, and I look at it and I was just like, and I just burst into tears. I call her up and I'm like almost hyperventilating. Yeah. And she's like, again, it's like, oh, come home. Like, oh, it's like safe and warm and get in, and it's just like, but I can't, I can't, I have to do. And so, but then there's more of those moments, which was just like that sweet relief. And the biggest moment for me was the moment where I was sitting in a meeting with the new CEO of Domain, Jason Pellegrino. We're sitting down there. We're talking now about the mechanics of bringing the business together, et cetera, et cetera. And I get a text from my brother and he's like, check your bank account. And I was like, when like a bomb goes off and it's like that, and I could no longer hear Jason talking, and I was like, oh, I've got to get out of this room because I can't. He's like, I can see his mouth's moving, I can see he's engaging, and I was like, I need to go to the bathroom. Bear with me for 1 second. I go there. I just call my brothers. We're freaking out. But the reason that was the most exciting is because then we knew. I called my parents. And they landed like $3.5 million into their bank account. And so that moment was like everything we'd worked for in the negotiations to make sure it was the best possible number. It was for that moment. And then realizing, okay, they never would have gotten a return over, it was like a 5-year difference from 1 to 3.5 million. It was like amazing. Wow. So they could buy themselves their home, buy an investment property. Like that was the most special moment of them all. And I think from there, I just really made sure to like sit in it, in it and feel good about it, because there's many horror stories out there around people selling the business, making squillions, losing their purpose, and then just going, actually, the money wasn't actually ever interesting. It was more the journey and all that stuff. And so I had to, really make sure that my brain just didn't tick over into like, what's the next thing? What's the next thing? What's the next thing? It's just like, hey, you've worked a long time for this. Like, just enjoy it.
Yeah. And I've spent a bit of time with Simon Beard from Culture Kings, and he went through a similar thing where, he had 300 million hit his bank.
Huge.
And he was just like, now what?
Yeah.
You know, it sounds strange because I guess I can't relate to Simon in that situation nor yourself, but like being in that position, is there any fear when that happens? When you see the money, like, okay, this chapter of my life essentially is complete. And here's like evidence of that. Is there any fear? Is there any uncertainty in that moment?
There wasn't for me.
Okay.
And the reason I say that is because I'd heard that story. I've heard the story about the fear and about the purpose loss so many times. And I was, through that year, I was ingesting a lot of content around the moment of that happening, around these big, these big sale events.
Right.
And the same themes came up over and over again, which was exactly that, which was people felt empty. You know, there's a guy called David Shane, sold his business for 1.1 billion, and he had a year after it fully depressed.
Yeah.
And he was like, I don't understand. And that's the challenge, is because when people hear it, they're like, they're saying, I'd rather be crying in my Ferrari than in my Toyota Yaris. Like, whatever. I think the reality is, we as humans, more important than the cash dollar figure is around like purpose and meaning and like what is the reason for living. And that during that business creation, you had a very strong reason. You know, there was something that each day you had these little fires to put out. You get these little dopamine spikes throughout the day and stuff like that. And then there's that moment where you're no longer. But because I'd consumed all that content, I knew what was coming ahead of me. So I knew that was going to come ahead. So I had already made sure that my mindset wasn't going to be, oh, I'm sad now. It was kind of like, what is the shift in terms of my thinking to go like, everybody needs a purpose. What is my new purpose?
Right. So you pivoted your purpose prior to this event taking place.
Yeah, I'd already like connected to like what is it going to be, right? What is it going to be? And I'd already started to have that in my mind, so there wasn't a shock. I think if you didn't think about it and that moment happened, it would come as a shock because you'd be like, but I thought should I be happy? Like this textbook, money's in the bank, like I should be so stoked. Like what's happening? Yeah. And so, but I intentionally made sure that it wasn't going to be a thing for me.
Yeah, and I heard a musician. I think it's John Mayer said it, and he said if you're, he's like, a lot of people, this happens to a lot of people in the music industry where they go into, create that hit song and then their career takes off and then they're filling out stadiums, but they've never quite articulated what success meant to them. Yeah. So they never quite get that moment of reality of like, oh, it's my goal has happened. I've accomplished it. Yeah. And, not knowing the specifics can hurt people. But you, it sounds like you had a very specific goal. You were chasing it for a year. Your mind's already starting to recalibrate into the next thing. Where did your mind wander? You're like, okay, the cash is coming in. How did you shift your purpose to the next thing, and what was that for you? Yeah,
so there's probably three things. One was I'd luckily timed. Sorry, I should change that. I didn't think about timing it, but it happened to have timed perfectly.
So you just claim you're like, I meant
that. When I share what I'm about to say, you're like, yeah, you can't time that, brother. So my son was born about a week after the deal.
Wow.
So
that's cool.
So that was a pretty cool.
Plenty of napping money.
Yeah. So that brings you firmly back to reality when you're cleaning shit off your child at 4 a.m. Right? Yeah. It doesn't matter what numbers in your bank, you're still cleaning that poo. Yeah. So that was that then got to see a lot of my focus and like making sure that I could be a great dad.
And that's a momentous moment in life, is becoming a father.
Yeah, exactly. Yeah. So like on the closing, in the closing final moments of the deal, I was doing negotiation from birthing class. So it's very much happening, at the same time. The second was I wanted to make sure that like the business, yes, we got a sale, we got an outcome, but if we just turned into cool, we don't care the moment it happens. Like I don't see that as success. Like I see the success as if the business sells, in 10 years time, I'm doing whatever I might be doing and the business is doing better than it ever did before. Like I think that's the next evolution for me. Like that's the next your boss, if you will, in business, which is like if you can make a business that can outlive and outlast you as an individual, you've done something really well. And so my next purpose shift was like, okay, how do I make sure that the team feel really supported and like I can work with them the best I can to actually merge this business in, right? So like, yes, I'm not financially tied to it anymore, but like, from a caring perspective, I still very much care about this business and I still wanted to see it succeed.
And how many people were in the team when it got acquired by Domain?
About 350. Yeah. So fairly significant. So there was Australia, New Zealand, the Philippines. So we're spread across there.
Yeah. Were there moments when you were scaling your business where it felt like the identity of the business had shifted? Like, for example, you know, we're on the precipice of becoming 30
Yep.
individuals, but 4 years ago it was just me. And it's weird. The business gets to a stage where there's like 3 or 4 people. You're like, okay, there's a certain vibe. Then 14 seemed to be another one for me.
Yep.
Then 20 seemed to be another one. Now it seems to be like, okay, I don't even see people for 2 weeks now. Like it's just a weird thing, but like 300, man, I can't even imagine. But like, how do you make sure that you're constantly keeping up with the growth of the company and making sure that the team is supported the right way?
So what I'm about to share is probably not from a place of I did this perfectly, but it's probably these are the lessons that I learned along the way.
Okay. Yeah.
So it's like more of a reflection now that I've done it and can think back to the day one.
Yeah.
A business when you're between 1 and 40 so there's those different milestones you just shared is very correct.
They seem little though compared to maybe 40 maybe.
No, still it's because everything is from a percentage change is larger, right? So like when you go from 20 to 40 you're doubling. When you go from 200 to 250 you're not doubling, right? So so like the leap feels actually bigger.
50 people becomes like, yeah, okay, cool.
Yeah, exactly.
Versus, well, we doubled.
Yeah. Exactly. So the key difference is when you have like 40 people or 30 people or 20 people, you're usually all in the same office.
Right.
You as the leader set the tone for the business. So when they see you walk in the door each and every day and they see your vibe, your energy, your excitement, they see you having chats with the different team members, that really truly sets the tone as much as you may not realize as a leader. So I used to check in with my team once I got a PA and I'd be like, you know, I'd be having a stressful moment, let's say during the deal. And I'd like say to my PA, I would say, do I look stressed? She's like, oh my God, you look so stressed. So even as I was in an office, people look over at you. And this happened to me often where they'd be like, you know, they'd message me on Slack and be like, just saw you pick your nose. I'm like, fucking hell. Like, you know, like they're looking.
That happens here a lot, yeah.
They're looking at you kind of for, you know, with maybe not even realizing, but like for like, how should I feel?
Yeah, because you're the leader of the tribe.
So if you're stressed, it might be that the business is not going well. If you're excited, it's going, like there's just so many different cues that you're showing without even using your words.
Right.
And so, but mostly it's positive, right? Mostly, you know, 90% of the time you're coming in here, you're pumped. You know, people get to see your interactions with other team members. And so they're seeing that bounce. So the main point there is you get to set this culture really, I shouldn't use the word easily, but easier. And it's more, the culture is more from you as an individual than it needs to think about broader than that. Then we start to grow. And what happens from when we go to that next leap? So now let's say between 50 and 100.
Yeah.
What happens is you naturally will start to have people that are going to be working from home, potentially working in a different state. There's just a bigger office. You know, we got to a place where we had like 1,000 square meters, multi-level, and you start to bump into those people a little less.
Yeah.
They see a little less of you as a leader. And what we could have done better is understanding that trajectory from the early stages and going like, how do we kind of create systems and process that's going to keep this feeling and this energy to when we get bigger?
Yeah.
And so I think that's the thing was like when we were in those younger stages, you know, I listened to podcasts around values of a business and me and my brothers about, like, yuck. You know, like, oh, that's such a, like, whatever. It's just a word on a wall.
Yeah.
But you realize that but there's going to be people that don't almost ever get to see you.
Right.
You know, we in the final years of the team, I would go to the Philippines once or twice a year. Those people have once or twice a year as an opportunity to kind of see me and some of the other leaders. For the rest of the time, they don't, right?
Yeah.
So it's like, what are the things that you can do to be like, hey, this is what we stand for as a business. You know, this is how we treat our customers. This is who we are. This is what we believe in. And what are those things that you're going to continually to reiterate?
Yeah.
So like what I learned from hiring an incredible HR manager by the name of Bobby, she came from the Aristocrats. I think they had like 3,000 people.
Wow.
And it was all around values, goals, mission, and like how every meeting I then beyond that, I had to set with like, you know, as you know, one of our values is customer obsession.
So and you just constantly point back to
constantly. And so it's like this is like this, the North Star are these like 5 values. Here's the goal, which is we want to get to 80% market share. And then every interaction, I'm relaying that. Now that might be an interaction where I'm having a one-on-one with one of my direct reports who are reporting into me. And those are leaders because the idea is if I'm doing that, then they're more likely to do that. And where I think I had this moment where I went, oh shit, okay, it is very effective as I listened to the podcast with the Airbnb CEO on Stephen Bartlett, Diary of a CEO. And then I had Susan Wheeldon on my podcast, the managing director of Australia for Airbnb. And the way in which she talked about the business, the values, the mission, everything, I was like, were you a founder? Like, it made me feel like she was a direct replica of this person. And I was like, this person is 10,000 kilometers away. You've probably seen each other 3 times, but you've ingrained it into your company so well that it's happening in every step of the way. And so then that's how, when you get to hear like down to any employee, like their feeling of the business is because you have those right things in place.
So that's like an identifier of good replication of cultures when someone kind of feels like the CEO in sorts.
Correct. And I think the best way to think about this, and how I used to think about at Realbase, is if one of my team members are at a barbecue and someone asks them like, what does your business stand for? Or, what's the main thing you guys are working towards? If they're responding with things that are as close to the values and as close to the mission, as close to the goals as possible, I have been successful. You know, like I've then done the message enough times, and as a leader, it's going to feel like nauseating because it, like you think about it all the time, every day. Yeah. But just you remember, okay, I might have a meeting with once every 2 weeks, so they're only actually hearing it for 3 minutes every 2 weeks. It's a very small amount of mind share, and so I'll pull it right back to your questions. It goes like, what is that difference? I think the difference is knowing and understanding that you know, as this shift happens for yourself and for other people, is like start to think about those things now, because things start to snowball really quickly.
Right.
For us, it was very, very quickly because we went from 40 to 400 overnight through a merger. But I find like the 1 to 5 team members is like a very long stint, but you're probably finding it starting to snowball already.
Yeah.
And so if you don't start thinking about them now, it'll soon it starts to feel like it gets carried away, and then the culture is almost set without you.
Yeah, you don't have as much influence on it anymore. How would you try to think of something to put together in a way that's actually relevant and exciting for people? Because you see, we kind of joke that they call like the vanilla values, where you go into a company and they've got trust in the wall, they've got integrity, and they've got, how do you find values that people can actually jive with and care about? Yeah.
So how we did it is what we did is essentially crowdsource them.
Right.
So I sat down with Bobby. We put together what we believe was like the 12 things that were really important to myself, to the business that I believed we were. It was around, like for me, it was like pace and speed in which we work. Like always putting the customer number one, because we don't have the customer, we don't have money.
Yeah.
We're all not here.
Period.
Right. Yeah. Number 3 was around, creativity, enjoying the journey, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera. We then went and pushed that out to the business. And now at that time we're 350, 400 people. And got everybody to pick what resonated with them. And then when it came back, it's like everybody felt like they were buying into it,
right,
and they were part of it. Now, that's different because we're doing a survey. It's a lot of people. Here it's like I would have a spitballing session to be like, think less about the company and think about like as an individual. So like how I might frame this is like have a team meeting and be like, hey, we want to talk about like as a person, what do you stand for? And get everybody to put in like, what are the 5 things, like your 5 non-negotiables? Like the reality of values is that's what they should be. It's like, if you have a value, it's like you stand and stop by that, right? Like, so if someone is an asshole to a customer, it's like, no, we don't stand for that. You cannot work here.
Yeah.
Right. Like that's what it is. So it's like to individuals, like what is important to you? Because the reality is you might have things that are important to you and the team don't resonate with that. Well, 1, you'll have to reconcile and go, well, do I have the right team? But 2, also just like you might, things might pick up and they can reconcile to one another. So like the way in which you worded it and my wording was different, but they have the same essence to each other. And I think by having, a foundational team like you have today, you'll be able to get to a place where you're like, I'm really happy with that. But I think like with everything in business, it's organic. So what you think is really important today may dramatically shift in 2 years. So don't worry about, we've got to have the things that's going to last for 10 years. It's like what's really important to us today.
It can change and update and evolve and grow. Okay, cool. Interesting, man. And I really appreciate you kind of sharing that with me, because I think, we're at that stage now where we've figured that out and we're implementing it. And it's a game changer. And I think, it's important in business. For you, pivoting out of, the acquisition and making sure that your team was supported and the culture was still there for them and everyone's kind of winning here. Your parents are winning, your brothers are winning, the companies, whatever. It's all wins all rounds. You're walking into fatherhood. Now you're talking about the philanthropy with what you're doing around Eat With Purpose and your podcast, Chew the Fat. So like, talk me through that journey. Like, what's your North Star now? What are you chasing and trying to build in the market now for yourself?
So for context, I still work at Domain.
Yeah.
So what I'm doing right now is based on those things I do. We talked about the purpose shift. Is I had a walk with my wife and I said, okay, I need to have. I know that there's going to be an emptiness soon. I need to do something that's going to fuel me up and get me excited, because that's where I'm at my most that's where I'm at my best.
Yeah.
Is when I'm fired up. And so we had a walk. I came up, I was like, okay, what are the things that I'm missing in my life? So I'm a big believer in like, your life doesn't have to be filled up by your work. Your work is not going to give you everything you need. So I was like, what are the things that are missing in my day-to-day work that I would love to have that makes my life more well-rounded and complete?
Yeah.
And for me, it was I had lost creativity, creativity as a CEO for that many people. The day-to-day, there was not that much creative outlet for me. Part of my business was we had 100 shooters and photographers and videographers, and in the early days I'd be sitting down watching their videos and bouncing ideas of like creative videos, creative marketing. A lot of that was lost. So I was like, okay, I need something that's creative outlet, and number two is like something that I can do without necessarily needing to learn. And I was like, okay, well, that's cooking, and that's kind of unique.
Right.
So then I went, okay, those are the two things. Okay, what's a big, audacious, scary goal that's going to get me fired up, and that's not going to be for myself and my family? And that was the moment I was like, okay, well, I want to raise $1 million for charity through writing a cookbook called Eat with Purpose. And that was just the thing that I do before, in mornings, in evenings, and in weekends, to keep that that excitement. And I found it's like flowing on. I got a text from one of my amazing team members, Liv, this morning, who just texted me saying, thanks a lot. I just listened to Michael Crossland's podcast. I've been crying on my way to work today. She said, but I've never been more compelled to work. So it's it's also like feeding into that.
That's
as well.
Really cool.
Yeah, it's really, really, really special. And so that's really it's a point in time for me. It's not like, okay, this is it now, and I'm going to try and go cure malaria like Bill Gates. But it's more like, what is something that's going to stop me from falling into the trap of strive, and never arrive? Again, it's like a point in time, a moment where I can look back and go, I did something that was beyond myself. And through that was this incredible journey, which is getting to do things I've never done before. So I'd never done social media, as an example. Before May last year, I didn't have an Instagram account because it didn't serve me at the time. I had no intention to scroll, so I just didn't have one. Then I was like, okay, in order to do this, I need to create an audience so that I can sell it much easier. I didn't want to sell one by one. I didn't want to go to public, what do they call them? A publisher.
Yeah.
So I need to create an audience. I was like, cool, I got to start my social media game. And then I was like, I got to learn how to do business to consumer, because I've always been a business to business. So there's also these different elements where I'm like trying to stretch my business muscle, because in the end of the day, I'm creating a business.
Yeah.
The business, I don't get the funds. I'm personally paying for the cost of the book, the cost of the marketing, and 100% the revenue goes through. But then it's also like I get to check a mark to go like, cool, I now know how to sell a business to consumer. And that's something that I've never done, and I wanted to figure out a way to learn for myself.
That's really cool, man. And do you know The 6 Core Human Needs by Tony Robbins?
No.
It's really fascinating. You've kind of touched on all of them, to be honest. And he talks about in life, there's like 6 things that human beings kind of primarily need to, I guess, find fulfillment and satisfaction. And one, which is uncertainty. So we need a level of uncertainty to be thrilled and excited. Like, how you said it was exciting, but also terrifying at the same time. We also need certainty, like security, knowing that you're going to go home and have a roof over your head, that your child's safe and all the rest of it. You need a certain level of certainty. Then there's growth and development. You want to feel like you're progressing, you're pushing yourself, you're growing. Then there's significance. You're seen as, someone who is of significant value to those around you. Love and connections, another one. Friends and family love and adore you. I always forget the 6th one. Do you remember what it is?
Being a full-time legend.
Oh, I think it's, being a full-time legend. I think it's contribution, giving to others. So you've talked about uncertainty, you've talked about certainty, you've talked about maybe significance by running a company and injecting culture, and you've kind of come back to that last part of the wheel, whereas, you're like, how do I give to a community? But walk me through that. Like, how did you find social media in the initial stages? Like, you're trying to give for free on the internet. You're trying to build a tribe. Like, what was your experience going through that journey for the first time?
So through the building of the business and through all the content that I ingested over the years, I feel like I was very perfectly positioned to try and take it on at pace quickly. My philosophy when it comes to business is a little bit different to some people. Some people are always striving for meticulous perfection, the 1%ers. I have a rule which is kind of like 80% and go.
Okay.
Right. So like how quickly can I get to an objective in a way that's not disingenuous or like breaking rules, but like in a way that's the pathway of least resistance. So why I say that when it came to social media is I went, okay, cool. What do I have that's kind of unique and different to other people? And because I built a business, things that were unique to me was like some of the connections I made. You know, so I'm part of a Forbes club as an example. And one of the people in the Forbes club was a guy called Jason Fong, who's the boss of Bali. So 2.2 million followers on Instagram.
Wow.
So I was like, okay, how do I create value for Jason that then's going to help propel me? At that stage, I had like 1,000 followers. And I was like sitting down, thought about it. Then we went out to lunch and I was like, cool, Jason, I'll fly to Bali. I'll bring my videographer. So I've got a full-time videographer editor on salary. I'll fly him over. We'll spend 4 days in Bali and we'll go to all the resorts that are like the best of the best. We'll film it. We'll edit it. We'll give you some content and I'll collaborate on it.
Yeah.
Right. And so for 1,000 followers, we post these videos. First one, 450,000 views, interaction, engagement out of control.
Wow.
Next one, 750,000 views, interaction, engagement out of control. Like it's still to this day, it's like it's coming through and buzzing all the time.
Wow.
And
so
so
the
like,
original content from a year ago is still performing.
Still
Showing up on the algorithm.
Because it's around, because it's like when someone searches Ubud, what's it going to surface?
Yeah.
Local Sally's, who's got like 1,000,
Yeah.
or this one has got 750,000 and like 1,000 comments.
So you're creating forever green content.
Well, almost. I didn't think about it like that, but I just thought about, okay, how do I get into the most amount of eyes in a smallest amount of time?
Love it.
So when
It's very aggressive approach, but
Yeah.
I'm really enjoying this. Keep going, man. That's great.
like everything I do, like I'm trying to push to a place. It's like, okay, I gotta go and I gotta go fast.
Yeah.
Now, but I need to boil it down and come back right for the audience. Because like, well, okay, I don't have a connection to Forbes. I don't have this. I don't have that. Like Frank.
But you were like, I've got these tools in my toolbox.
Yep.
Let me use them.
Exactly.
Right.
So, but for the audience who doesn't have that specific tool, it's like, okay, how do you think about it in a different way? The way I think about it is really simple. Everybody has what I call their unfair advantage. So whether that be when you start a business, your unfair advantage is the time you can give to a customer. The big business down the road can't give the time that you can give because they need to make the dollars and cents and the KPIs and all that shit, right? But you got time.
I have an interesting story in that. Like one of my friends I grew up with, his name is Andy. He worked for Ray White Real Estate.
Yep.
And you know, he said to me, he said that when he started, everyone that he was like, I would sell your house, said to him, well, how long you been doing this? He's like 6 weeks.
Yeah.
You know, so if you're selling a $2 million house, why would you want to hire Andy?
Yeah.
If you could hire someone who's sold. And he said, I'm going to dedicate my whole week just to you.
Yeah.
So you're saying that unfair advantage is like, what can you do that no one else can?
Exactly. And
Yeah.
that's unique to everybody. Everybody has an unfair advantage.
Yeah.
Right. And so let's say you're trying to build that profile in the early stages, like, you know, using that collaboration thing as a good idea is, you could go to the local restaurant and be like, what kind of value can I give you? What's something I can give you that makes you want to collaborate with me? Or there's always someone in your sphere that has 5, 10, 15,000 followers that are slightly above you. And there is something that in your tool set, something in your remit that you can deliver them that can help you work with them and partner with them. Now, it might not be a collaboration. It might just be you do something that's really like, great example. I'm mentoring a young startup at the name. I'm going to remember the name so I can give them a shout out, but they've got a really cool business, which is essentially, live, how would I explain it? So it's essentially merch. They're called Merch Window. So
How do you spell that?
MERCH window.
Okay, cool.
Okay. Now the idea of Merch Window is if you know when you start a business and you want to get cool T-shirts, and you there's all the different branding. But the annoying part about being a young small business is you don't want to have to buy 5 sizes of your T-shirts with 5 times 5 sizes.
Yeah.
Because you don't want to spend the cash. What they've done is they've made it that they will do like on-demand printing of that. So you create a merch window on your website, whether it be selling to customers or selling and having an internal, and you go, I want 1 large and 1 medium.
Right.
And they print on demand that 1 large and 1 medium.
That's impressive because I used to work in print and it's not easy to do that.
No, it's not easy to do that. And it's very compelling because it means that someone who has no money can start their merch window.
Yeah.
Right?
And
then
just
you
order as they need to.
Exactly.
Yeah.
And you can add the margins on top. So like perfect for an influencer who's like getting into the game and doesn't want to go buy 10,000 units. And they just don't have to worry about anything. They just copy and paste this into their website. Done.
Cool.
Right. They were talking to me and they were going like, thinking about creative ways to go about it. And I was like, your unfair advantage is you can literally print someone's logo on a T-shirt in a day. And I was like, so what I want you to do with your next sales opportunities is think about if the person you're selling to maybe has a baby Why don't you print their logo on their new little baby onesie and then give it to them? That's an unfair advantage, right? Because you pick up the phone and one day later, the baby has your logo on it, like their logo, right?
Now you're top of mind. They're thinking of you.
Exactly.
Yeah, it's surprise and delight. Like do something.
Surprise and delight is exactly the idea.
Yeah, and I think so many people don't think about surprise and delighting their customers because, like you were saying before, right? Like even now, where we have quite a predominant celebrity that we're in the midst of doing some work with. And we're doing things that we've never done before as a company to stay top of mind, to constantly surprise and delight this individual, because we know if that deal goes through, it's kicking the door down to do other things. And what you're saying is sometimes you have to think not would you say traditionally, you have to kind of think about the problem at hand creatively.
Yes, absolutely.
Like how do we create impact? Not necessarily to get money right now, but how do we blow the customer's mind or the potential customer's minds?
Correct, because that's often the most important thing in the early stage of business. Less so than the $200 sale is going to be the amount of mind share that you can get on customers.
When you say mind share, what do you mean?
So everybody has, let's say, your mind in a day has got 100% of its time.
Okay,
and that's going to be divided in different things. So you got some for your child, you got some for work, you got some for got to go to the grocery store.
I see what you're saying. So like 60% of my day is work. Yeah, 30% kids. Correct. 10% gym and eating or whatever.
And if you make big enough impact, you create more mind share, so they're thinking about it. So therefore, when one of their employees, one of their team members, one of their friends, one of their family asks, "Hey, do you know anybody in the merch business?" and you're like, "Boom, I do, merch window." Right?
And you're not trying to remember. You're like,
yes,
call this person. Yeah.
And so, like, how we did that in our business, as an example, was our unfair advantage was we owned huge huge digital printers. So we could do high quality brochures in literally 30 seconds. So what we did is, like, I would go to a really good real estate brand that I really liked, and they were going to be a big dollar value for us.
Right.
I went to their open home on a Saturday, and I could okay, what is it that I could figure out that's going to be different for them? And I saw one of the businesses, because of the cost, rather than having an A4 booklet, they had 2 A4 pages. So I said, perfect. Okay. So we went back, our designer designed what it would look like in a 4-page brochure. So when I came to my sales interaction, I hand them their brand, beautifully done, in a 4-page booklet that looks like it should be actually going to a property. And they looked at me like, wait, we've never done this design. I'm like, yeah, I know, we did that for you. And I will give you that at the same price you're paying for your 2 A4s because your brand is too good to be doing 2 A4 pages. Boom, deal. Right? And that was my unfair advantage. So everybody has one.
Like show, don't tell. Because that's an underestimated one as well, which is like we think just by telling someone something, they'll understand. And if you said to them, hey, wouldn't it be great if I did this on a 2-pager, they probably would have been like, whatever. Yeah. But because you actually showed them, they were like, how do I get that? I've just seen it.
Correct.
I want that.
Exactly.
Yeah. Interesting, man. So with this brand, like what would you say is something that, to your point, when you're getting started, you had quickly ask yourself, how do I get from A to Z? And immediately I've got all these amazing connections. And we're also in the midst of publishing a book. We've finished writing it. Awesome. And there's a point in there where we talk about, is it chapter 10 where we talk about access roads? Mm-hmm. Access roads are like, who do you have access to right now? Yeah. Right. So we've just met and now we're establishing a relationship between ourselves. Let's just say I meet someone that I think could benefit by meeting you. It's just an email away. Now we've established a network together. For someone who's looking to start in business, how would you say they should think about their access roads and how can they get that started? It sounds like this is something you were doing very aggressively from the beginning.
So not from the beginning of business. So this is one of those interesting things that I only upon reflection upon selling the business realized how closed and small my network was in terms of I didn't really have access to many people and that I had to start. So the Forbes Club I mentioned, only post deal. Did I realize I spoke to the CEO of Forbes through a connection because I started asking people for connections. Then realize I got to expand my network. I got to expand my world away from real estate. So I guess the first and most important thing would be back to that. Who do you surround yourself with? If you surround all of your friends are just chilling, drinking beers, relaxing, doing 9 to 5, they're probably not going to help you get 1 degree of separation around to the next person. And when I share that, I don't want people to think like all I think about is leverage. It's also like there are amazing people in all these different spheres as well. There are always assholes, but there are also some amazing people. Yeah. So it's just, I just often like having people in my life that have similar values, similar goals, similar interests, because like there's nothing more exciting than having a conversation where you're like, I'm trying to be great in business. Someone's like, so am I. And you bounce ideas and you get all like frothing and you're getting
Yeah.
excited, right? So firstly, it's like, okay, who do you surround yourself with in that immediate friendship circle? I'm not saying go and cut everybody out of your life, but it's like, if you don't have someone there that you can bounce ideas from,
Yeah.
start to think about who that might be. So you don't jump from there to, I want to go meet a billionaire. Like, let's just be realistic.
Yeah, people always say that. Like, I'm just gonna go start hanging out with billionaires. It's
Yeah.
like, well, who around? Because a lot of times around you, you'll have millionaires. You won't even realize it.
Yeah,
They're flying under the radar. Okay, so you start producing content. You have a full-time content creator. You're interconnected with all these other individuals, and you're kind of creating this. These ripples of attention back to yourself. Then you leverage that to start writing the book and filming your own podcast.
Yeah, correct. So for me, it's all around that audience. So like in my team now that works together on the content, and let's just call it the Frank Greeff personal brand. That by building that up, it's going to help with the selling of the cookbook. I've got Kai, an amazing videographer and editor. I got Maddie, my PA, that helps with all the launching of all the stuff. I've got the head of PR to Fred Shabesta, so finder.com. Again, based on
we had Fred on the pod.
Yeah,
we love
awesome
him.
guy. Yeah,
He's a
great guy. So his head of PR, Michelle.
Yeah.
So just engaged her now to again go and spend the dollars to broaden the name and horizon. Yeah. So the team of 4 of us now working on this kind of mission and purpose.
Hell yeah.
Yeah. And so for me, it's just like, how much can I possibly fill in? And everything has to point to that goal. Like everything, I have a very clear mission. I'm raising $1 million for charity. Full stop. It will be done. Anything I do in life, it kind of has to get me there. And I'm not saying like if my wife starts talking like, how's your day? I'm like, that doesn't serve my mission, baby. I'm not a psychopath, but in terms of like an opportunity comes in front of me, like, hey, here's $1,000 to go do this job. It's like, okay, does that truly help this mission?
Right.
No, like with this podcast, I'm like, yeah, great. This is get to meet interesting new people. And also it's going to help serve the mission. So I'm going to give my time to it.
Yeah.
But I want to add one thing to the part that you just talked about before around that network piece for people who are listening. One of the things that I've realized, because I do it and other people have done it to me, is people in every stage of the success ladder from like a financial, monetary standpoint, there are many people willing to give their time from like a mentorship or like a approachability standpoint. Like I get hit up all the time on LinkedIn, Instagram, blah, 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 blah. And most of the time, it's like part of my things this year is I have to say no more often. But most of the time I've spent last year I was doing 5 mentoring to young startups from different stages, from like early enter to scaling to scale up, 5 per week. It was carving out about 5 to 10 hours of my week every week because I love helping and seeing like ideas that come out and help inspire other people. But I've also had that in my life. Like I reached out to David Shane, sold his company for $1 billion in year 2000. Let's have lunch. Yes. You know what I mean? Like I'm like, wow, okay, crazy. So there are that many people. It's just about asking the question.
Yeah. Yeah, I've heard that a lot. Simon Beard talked about, he reached out to the guy who started Penny Skateboards. Yeah. And he harassed him for a year, and the guy eventually was like, all right, fine, let's hang out.
And that's the important part, right? It's like I sometimes, and now with my trying to say no, is you create a series of gateways. Yeah. Like I heard a great one from a guy called Gavin Rubinstein, and he was like, because his time has become very precious, like in order to work with him, he creates a series of like 10 gateways. So if someone goes, hey, I want to get a job with you, he goes, yeah, no worries. Can you call me tomorrow at 3 p.m.? They call him tomorrow at 3 p.m. Oh, hey, I'm so sorry. I'm really busy. Can you call me tomorrow at 10 past 5? And he does that for a series of things, then gets them in, then goes, can you email me? And he does that over a week. And he said, by the time the week goes past, 90% of people have just moved on with their life. And he goes, the final 10% of people, I now know that they have a little bit more hustle in them. They have a little bit more care. And so that's the thing is like, if you ask once and that's it, it's over. Well, it's probably, you're never going to get it. But like if you keep going and you try and add value, you do it from different ways, and you will eventually get the right people. And that's the thing that you want to see when you talking to people that actually care.
Right. And then with the crew that you have around you right now, helping you build and create the content, putting the book, I imagine there's a lot of videography, photography, post editing, social media engagement, all the rest of it. How do you make sure you have the right crew around you? Do you have any vet checks that you try to enforce with the crew around you? Yeah.
So I think for me, I have a very new rule, which I've learned, which is like for whatever business I do, whatever I do moving forward, I only want to work with A players. Yeah. And A players for me starts with a mentality and an eagerness, and then everything else flows on from that. Now, for me, when I work with people, I'm kind of lucky. Maddie, I used to work with Maddie at Realbase, so we'd already worked together for 2 years. Yeah. Kai, I've known him since he was 17. He was just one of those young, hungry go-getters who, like, at age 23, he's producing those gangster shit. Like, it's just so good. Again, like, so I've been able to see that over time. But let's go into the future and go like, what are my steps now? Like today for me, it's around, I first actually start with the person's why. Right. Like, so like before I get into anything, whether it be like I've done that many job interviews, like it's crazy. Like I remained in that interview seat for like 7 years. And my first thing is like, what is it that's most important to you in life? You know, take yourself, you're 80 years old, you're sitting on the couch, you're sipping on a tea. Like, what are you most proud of? And trying to, through a series of questions, rather than me asking you like, are you going to do working hard? And you're like, yeah, I'm going to work so hard.
Yeah.
I want to like avoid those questions. You don't really know what kind of questions I'm asking, but by finding out what is really important to you, whatever that might be, if your why is, I want to provide for my family. Great. If your why is like, I want to be really rich. Great. Like whatever it is, I need to find that out because I need to stress test that if your why is not great enough, when times get tough, you're gone. Right. And so like understanding that's going to be the driving force. Like if someone's, I was bullied as a kid and I need to prove the world wrong. I'm like, oh shit, you're gonna be,
You're my next CEO.
Yeah. So I was like, I think that's probably the most important. But then it's also around clear articulation consistently around what is the expectations. So I find this is a problem. Like I talk to people and it's like, hey, this person's not doing well. I'm like, okay, cool. How have you been managing that? Oh, we had a review 3 months ago. Not good enough. Like I want to clearly set the expectations weekly and have a conversations around like, hey, this is what I want to do, this is how I want to do it, and then check in with them to like, how do you think you went? And have that continuously that they know the expectations, and if they don't meet over a period of time, I can very quickly move on because I have been very clear.
Yeah. So clarity, having a definitive why, and some eagerness to show up and do it.
Absolutely.
Awesome, man. So one question we love to ask on every episode, and it's interesting where people go with this, but what's the weirdest thing that you've ever done to make money?
Sell my body. No. What is the weirdest thing I've ever done?
Or the weirdest thing you've ever done to make a profit?
Yep. No, love it. Okay. So at age 6 or 7, my as you heard, the context of my parents is we were very poor. We lived in New Zealand. And so part of their strategy to earn more money is my mum would paint in spare time and then go sell it at the markets. So every Saturday, they would sit there from like 5 a.m. to 4 p.m. And of course, I was like 6, so I had to be with them. And I got incredibly bored and I wanted marbles. I loved marbles. But my parents are not going to buy me my marbles.
Yeah.
So I just walk away from my parents around the corner. Back in the day, you could do that. It's 2024. You can't walk around the corner anymore without parents. I walk around the corner and I start singing 3 songs. Jingle Bells, Mary Had a Little Lamb, and another one. On repeat for hours. And I have a terrible singing voice. And I would just leave a hat there and people would walk past and throw me money. And I come back to my parents like I made $50. My dad's like, what? And I just go and buy myself my marbles.
Love that, man.
So, and like I just in that time, like I had 0 shame. So I couldn't. And one day someone came and they're like, I bought you a flute instead of giving you money. Learn how to play that. Or maybe a few extra songs.
Right.
Because like you can imagine they just hear the same songs terribly.
Yeah, I love that, man. I love like these stories about when people are children and they figure out a hustle and they don't even realize it. Where did that lead? Did that end up following you throughout your childhood or throughout your youth? Did you end up starting other businesses and things like that, or
not really? No. So I think
retired after
singing
Jingle Bells.
I got my vocal cords. No, I think what stuck with me was around the commercial means. Like I always wanted to be self-sufficient. But not necessarily. Like you got all these people like Simon Beard example, like selling the slippers, doing all that really cool stuff. I just was like, where can I earn dollars? So from the age of 14, I started working at a laundromat for $5 an hour. By the age of 16, I had 3 jobs. And so at school, like, having $250 for the week of school was like, I almost from that age was like financially independent to a degree, if you will, because that was really important to me because I was like, I wasn't going to get it from like, we had a roof overhead always. We had food in the fridge, but you'd never have like what's on top of that. And that's what I want. I wanted those little whizzy bizzies from the canteen, like,
hell yeah, man. I relate to that. And what's something you're absolutely obsessed with right now going into 2024 beyond running 6 kilometers a day?
Well, look, it's I often share, I am a little bit boring. I got like 4 things. I got like family, I got business, I got cooking, and then my last thing is health and fitness. So for most people, when they hear this, they will think it's obsession, and it kind of is. So I train 6 days a week. I wake up at 5 a.m, sauna, ice bath, train, then go for the run. I see a longevity doctor, get blood tests every 6 months to check. So I'd say that is kind of my obsession, is like, really optimizing my training continuously to a degree that most people think was weird, but I just love, there's just so much satisfaction that comes out of pushing yourself.
He's also wearing a Whoop, by the way.
Yes,
so
absolutely.
yeah.
Oh, my data was fucked this morning, guys. You are lucky I'm here. I got a 1% recovery.
Yeah.
It's interesting you say that you had a longevity doctor, because this is the 5th time I've heard that from a high performance entrepreneur, someone who's done very well in business and you're only 31, dude,
Well, my first doctor said to me, Frank, you're 31, you have a 0.001% chance of dying in the next 10 years, come back in 10 years. And I was like, that's fucking bullshit. Like you don't know that. You can always be more, you can always be more optimized. You know what I mean? Like, cause you haven't even dug into like what I eat. You don't even know, like, you can always do what can I do to live the best
just a
life?
standard doctor answer. You're like, what else? Yeah. So what led you down the route of looking at high performance, trying to create longevity in your life? Like what, like, again, I'm just finding it interesting that people are diving into this, but like, what was that for you?
So for me, I'm really lucky in this space. My brother, Ken, the eldest brother, started training with 14. He hasn't missed 5 days of the gym unless it was a calculated deload week, which happens once every like 16 weeks.
Yeah.
Since the age of 14.
Wow.
I've never met someone more diligent and more consistent in my entire life, full stop. So for example, they went to Byron with the family this year. They drive with a rowing machine in their car as well as dumbbells. Like most people look at that and go like, you're a fucking freak. Like, right? But I love it because it's like, because he's like, why does he do that? Because, he gets the pushing every single day. You start your day with the hardest thing. You get the dopamine, the endorphin release of completing that workout. You get the constant progression, all that stuff. So I got to learn like from that. I was very much in his shadows.
Yeah.
And then, my brother, the same, he's, trying to get a sub 3 Mara and all that kind of stuff. So it's very much in our little family world around, we all have a Whoop. We're in a Whoop group. My brother messaged me today. He goes, mate, your recovery is fucked. Like, he's like, he goes, something's wrong with you. And I was like, I think it's broken. I don't know.
Yeah.
And
so, like, it's his podcast, man.
I'm going to blow up from this. And so that was really the driving force, is learning that. And then post deal, it was like, okay, again, it's like every year start fresh. It's like, cool, what can I do a little bit differently to step it up? Yeah, I just also find it interesting and fun. You know what I mean? Like, it's not just about like, I'm going in there to suffer, like David Goggins. More like I also enjoy it. It's a social time, et cetera, et cetera.
Okay. And then to bring this into a close, man, like what for you do you think is like your X factor as an entrepreneur? Like what is that superpower that maybe you can unleash anytime you want that maybe other people aren't aware of?
Ooh, cool question. What is my superpower? I think my superpower comes from my context, which was I was the youngest brother of 2 in a family of 5. And from a very young age, I had to learn how to navigate older brothers, parents, and I played this role of almost like a highly empathetic 6-year-old. So like I reflect on like, my brother would be, he's a teenager, right? So like it's just standard behavior, but I didn't understand it yet. It was like he'd be screaming like, I hate you to my parents. And then I'd run to my parents and like play mediator. I'm like, he doesn't actually hate you. And I'd cry and I'd give him a cuddle. Right. And so that from a really young age, like I grew into learning and really understanding what it's like to be in the other person's shoes constantly. So like every time, like I laugh about this with my friends, like I don't beep the horn in the car, because when I think about beeping the horn, I go, but what if that person's having a really bad day? If I beep it and then they're now so sad that I've beeped the horn, they go and kill themselves. And like sometimes a little bit debilitating, it's a bit over the top, but it just means that I'm constantly thinking about like how this feels from the other person's shoes, which means in business, I can, when I'm sitting in a negotiation, I'm playing a game of chess around what I think you want. And often I know what it is and I know what the moves I need to do to get the right win-win situation. Or the team member, I know how to navigate this conversation, which might be a difficult, tough one where it's a performance review, but I know how to navigate it in a way because I've thought about your feelings, that by the end of it, you're not going to feel like I was threatening you. You're going to feel very comfortable and you're going to try your best. Yeah. And so it's really down to the leadership and the communication. And I think that is like my superpower, is motivating, inspiring people to like try to do their absolute best.
From like the inside out.
From the inside out.
Not
that's right.
Fear outward in.
100%. Yeah. Like I'm I've produced almost no fear.
Yeah. And that's an interesting one because I try and do that in our meetings too. I try to be a big cuddly bear sometimes and it bites me in the ass, but like, you gotta do what you gotta do, man. Yeah. Thank you so much for dropping in.
My pleasure.
Phenomenal story. And I just love your perspective. You definitely feel like sunshine, dude. You got a lot of amazing, just radiating energy. And
See, I've done it to you too.
Yeah, it's contagious, man. Very cool. But dude, any last thoughts? Anything you want to name drop before we close out?
Nah, all good. Thank you. I really appreciate it. It's been a good chat.
Thanks, man. Thank you so much, bro. Hey.